Okay, for the final part of this identity cookbook, we're going to take a look at email verification. Our current situation is people can sign up with a fake email address and we've got no way of confirming that that email address is valid. So we're going to take a look at this, and this opens up a lot of other functionality after you've implemented email verification. Then you can start to look at things like what to do if a user forgets their password. We're only going to go as far as email verification, but like I say, you'll have the opportunity then, if you want to go and add additional features to help users out, such as what they do if they reset or if they've forgotten their password. You can give them a way to reset this. But we're not going to cover that aspect, as I mentioned. We're going to do the email verification part. And to help us with this, we're going to need an email service that we can use. Now, the one that I'm using is SendGrid. They do have a free option to send emails. Obviously, there are limitations to how many you can send, but it's perfectly adequate for development and testing. We're not going to go as far as setting up our own email server, as that's not what this course is about. So we're going to use an email service called SendGrid. And what you'll need to do is sign up for this. You don't need a credit card or anything like that. You'll just need a verified email address of your own in order to use this service. And once you've got to this point and you're on your dashboard, there's a couple of things I just want to point out that you'll need in order to make use of this. And if we go down to the settings inside here, then a couple of things that you'll need to do. First of all, we're going to need to authenticate our sender with SendGrid. So in here, we've got sender authentication, and we're going to need to use a verified email account to send from when we send an email to a user of our application. Now, I've only gone for single sender verification because we're just testing this in development, and you'll need to verify a single email address. This isn't an unmonitored email account, by the way. I don't look at any of the emails in here, so please don't use this to try and contact me, but this is the email address that I'm going to be sending messages from for this application. So make sure you've got status of verified there. What we also need is, or what you can do, because this just gets annoying if you don't do this, is take a look at your tracking settings. Whenever a link is sent via an email, and we're going to be sending links to our application via emails, then it basically adds click tracking to any link that's clicked from in an email. And you probably want to disable this, unless it's something that you need to add. And I'll show you how to disable this inside SendGrid when we use it in our .NET application. But I've turned all of these off. And the other thing that you'll need inside here is the API keys. And what you'll need to do is generate an API key and note it down what it gives you afterwards. Because when you create this, it only shows you the key once, and then it never lets you look at these again. And it says here, for security purposes, we do not allow the key value to be displayed. Fine, but when you create an API key, you'll get the key. It will start with sg ... something, and then you'll be able to use that in your .NET application. So what we'll do is we'll head across to our application, and we're going to install the SendGrid package. So we're going to open up NuGet Gallery, and what we're going to look for is SendGrid. And we want the first one here. It's on version 9.22.0 in my case, and we're going to add this to our infrastructure project. And we're going to click install. And once this is installed, we can now make use of this. But what we'll do first of all, we'll go to our API, and we'll go to our app settings.json. And remember, we're not sending any of this information up to our public GitHub repository, nor to Heroku either. So we're going to add a couple of settings in here that we're going to use in development, but they're going to be stored in app settings.json. And then when it comes to Heroku, we're just going to configure these settings on our Heroku settings for our environment variables there. So what we'll do is we'll specify a couple of settings in here, and we'll say SendGrid. And then we'll open up curly brackets, and we'll have a user. And in my case, this is just a user that's going to appear in the sender of the email, and then we need our key, and this is the API key that you get when you create an API key in SendGrid. So I'm just going to paste in my key. So it should start with SG. If you've got it starting with something else, then it's probably not the right key that you're looking at. So just double check what you've got for your API key and paste it inside here. And what we'll do now is we'll just create a service inside our infrastructure project that we'll use to send the emails. And we'll create a new folder and we'll call it email. And inside here, I'm just going to create a new class and call it email sender. You might want to create an interface for this. I'm not going to do so just for time purposes, but you could create an interface for this so that you can use this email sender class in both your application project and elsewhere in your application. But since we only need this in the account controller, I'm not going to create an interface just for time saving purposes, but you could do. And what we'll do here is we'll create a constructor for this class. And inside here, we're just going to bring in our iConfiguration and call it config so that we can get access to the SendGrid settings. And we'll bring in Microsoft Extensions configuration. And we'll initialize the field from parameter. So what we're going to have in here is just a single method. So we'll say public async task that's not going to return anything. And we're going to say send email async. And we're going to take a string of the user email and a string of the email subject and a string of the message, and we'll just call it MSG. And then we'll create a new SendGrid client. So we'll say var client equals new, and we'll say SendGrid client, and we should be able to bring this in from using SendGrid. And what we need to pass this is our SendGrid key. So we'll use config, and then open square brackets, and in quotes, we'll say SendGrid, colon, and then key. Obviously, we're just using strings for our configuration here, so be super careful on the spelling and watch out for typos when using strings. And then we'll create a new message. And this is going to be a new SendGrid message. And we'll bring in sendgrid.helpers.mail. And what we'll do is we'll just initialize the properties in here for the SendGrid message class, and we'll have a from property, and this is going to be from a new email address, and this needs to match what your authorized sender is in SendGrid. So mine is trycatchlearn@outlook.com, and then I'm going to say config and open up square brackets and say SendGrid colon and user. And then we'll have a subject, and this is going to equal the email subject. We'll have plain text content, and this is going to equal MSG. And then we'll have HTML content equal to MSG. And then what we can do is say message, and then we can say add to, who's the message going to, and this is going to be a new email address, and we're going to say user email, and this is the user that in our case is registering. And if you want to turn off click tracking on a per message basis, then what you can do is say set click tracking and say false and false. Doesn't make any difference in my case because I've disabled all of these anyway, but it doesn't hurt to add that anyway. And then we can say await client, and then we can say send email async and pass in the message. And we also need to bring in system threading tasks. And one more thing we need to do, we just need to go to our application service extensions and just add our email sender as a new service inside here. So what we'll do, we'll say services add scoped, and then we're just going to pass in email sender and bring this in from infrastructure email. So that's our email infrastructure side of things set up. What we'll take a look at next is our account controller.